This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good evening, everyone. If I could have your attention. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Stacy Yarbrough, and I am the Town Clerk of North Haven. Welcome to the 2019 Town of North Haven public hearing for the proposed budget for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. Joining me on stage tonight to answer all your questions and inquiries is Richard Monaco, the Chair of the Board of Finance, Edward Swinkowski, who is the Town of North Haven's Finance Director, and also Pam Mangini, who is the Director of Finance for the Board of Education. Tonight, we will present the Town of North Haven's tentative proposed budget. For the municipal town government side, it will be presented by our first selectman, Mr. Michael Frieda. And for the Board of Education side, it will be presented by our Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Patrick Stirk. You might wonder how the town creates a budget for each year. Well, each year in December, every department head and the Board of Education is asked to submit a tentative budget for each of their departments for the upcoming fiscal year and to present these budgets to the Board of Finance. In the new year, each department head is required to attend a workshop before the Board of Finance to present their tentative budgets. The Board of Finance then takes all the information they've accumulated and creates the proposed budget that we have here tonight. The proposed budget is then presented to the town at the public hearing here. The next step is the annual town budget meeting, which is currently scheduled for Monday, May 13th, 2019. And then there'll be a budget referendum for the town, which will occur on Tuesday, May 21st, 2019. Finally, once a budget is passed, the Board of Finance sets the mill rate for the new fiscal year. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing only. Just to be clear, it's for your questions and your comments and your concerns. There will be no voting on any issues tonight, nor will there be any issues discussed that aren't part of the budget that's presented to you tonight. As we move forward, we will have the presentations, as I've told you, by Mr. Frieda and Mr. Stirk. After both budgets have been presented, we will open up the tentative budget to comments. Please let every person that comes to the microphone have your courteous regard. Everyone will have a chance to speak. When you go up to the microphone, please limit your comments and questions from 5 to 10 minutes. If you don't get everything you'd like to say done the first time, we're going to have everyone who wants to speak go first, and then we'll start again. So please limit 5 to 10 minutes. Now, Mr. Frieda will come before you and present the government budget. Please welcome Mr. Michael Frieda.
Thank you very much, Stacy. Welcome again to Pam, Rich, and Ed. And I'd like to say it's an honor to be with Patrick Stirk this evening, our new principal, his first budget presentation, and I'd like to ask you to give him a round of applause, please. So I'd like to take you through the town side of the budget and share with you where we are and where we're going. I'm pleased to announce that there will be no tax increase this year. The mill rate will remain the same, and I'd like to take you through how we have gotten there. But before I do, I'd like to remind everyone of something I said several times in the past, and that is once we start growing our top line revenue, which I committed to back a few years ago, we're going to be seeing some really good things here in town. Not only new businesses, top line revenue growth, incremental revenue growth, new jobs, and a great deal of synergy throughout the town that will allow us to reinvest back into the town to help enhance the services to our residents. So I want to start with this slide. The total incremental expenditures on both the town and the Board of Education side represent a 4.9% increase, or $4,868,562. This number fully funds the Board of Education request at 2.9% and also helps enhance public safety, police and fire, in addition to offering capital to some of the other departments. How are we offsetting these expenses? And how do we derive a no tax increase by reinvesting, or as we reinvest back into the town? There's three ways we're doing it this year. Number one is the grand list growth. Our grand list growth this year, ladies and gentlemen, is among the largest grand list growths in the state of Connecticut, and it will continue to grow. I anticipate another solid year of growth next year. So what does that mean? That grand list growth is yielding an incremental $2,348,000 of top-line revenue growth. Secondly, down through the years, Ed Swinkowski and I have very carefully prepared for the day when, as a result of the high school continued to be paid off from it being built and finished back in 2005, preparing and anticipating the debt service increase on the middle school, preparing for and anticipating the debt service increases and renovating our firehouses and now our new police department, which should be ready sometime in July to be open. So we have put aside and applying to this year's budget $1.4 million in debt reserves in the general fund. That's $1.4 million. And thirdly, from the unrestricted fund balance, every year we carry over an amount. We're carrying over $1,125,000. So when we look at reinvesting back in the town, that $4.8 million that I showed you in the previous slide, we see that through these three components, growing the grand list, preparing for the debt service by applying $1.4 million, and then applying another $1,125,000, that's how we're deriving a no tax increase this year. And we're pleased to be able to offer this for some additional reasons. We continue to be recognized as a municipality in being very well managed financially. Just today, I received a text from a statewide bond agency that deals with municipalities all over the state to tell me that North Haven is the talk of the state in terms of its financial positioning. We continue to be AAA rated financially. As I mentioned earlier, we continue to grow our grant list and will continue to grow it by bringing in new businesses. And that is a guarantee. And I can tell you it's a guarantee because I'm involved personally, like I've said before, with every single economic development project in the town. And number four, as I mentioned, we've been preparing for paying our debt on our new middle school, our police department, and our firehouses for the past few years. Let's take a look at the breakdown of the incremental expenses. The Board of Ed at 2.9%, that number is $1,537,477. And you'll hear from our superintendent shortly. On the town side, you see the $1,546,768. In addition to that, on the town side, our health insurance for the town only increased $401,000. The Board of Ed number at $1,537,000 includes the health insurance increase. Our town capital on the increment side is $377,000. That is $377,000 more than last year. And the debt that you see in this budget is $1,600,270. The total, $4,868,562. So when we look at the town side, we see $3,331,000. It's a 7.26. That seems pretty high, but that's a reinvestment back in the town that includes a carryover of 2 new firefighters that we added this fiscal year into next year. We're also adding 2 more firefighters starting in January next year. And for those that remember, we needed to really help ensure that our 911 emergency dispatch system was robust enough to handle the calls that continue to come into the town. So this budget on the town side includes for the police department 4 new dispatchers starting in January. Again, on the Board of Ed side, you see the increase. When we look at the allocation of the town side and the board side, 53% of the budget is on the Board of Ed side, 47% on the town side. Now, when we take a look and examine a little bit more closely the debt service allocation, within the debt that you see in this budget, $5,346,607 is Board of Ed debt, including paying off the high school and including $2.4 million of debt in this year's budget for the middle school, starting to pay that. We as a town, unlike some other municipalities, carry the Board of Education debt on the town side. So when we put that into the pie chart, 42% of the overall budget is town-related and 58% is on the Board of Ed side, which is fairly consistent the way it's been over the past several years. 69.57% of the current debt in this year's budget is to support the new middle school and the high school debt. Let's take a look at some of the capital requests. On the police side, we see $161,000. 3 cruisers this year. On the fire side, we see $658,000, and the biggest part of that is we're moving forward with purchasing a used ladder truck. And I give the fire department and Chief Paul Januszewski a lot of credit for coming in and telling us that they can use a used ladder truck, which is significantly less than what a new ladder truck would cost. That's that capital there. The library, $12,000. On the IT side, many of our platforms in the town are still Windows 7, which will be obsolete by the end of this year. We need to reinvest back in information technology, and that's what that $76,506 is. Public Works, we need to repair for safety reasons, the concrete floor there, that's $28,000. And that's a total of $116,506. So now the total capital in this year's budget is $936,000, which is about $300,000 more than it's been in the past few years. When we take a look at the allocation of the capital, we see the spread across the departments, but keep in mind, $300,000 is for the used ladder truck. The mill rate will remain the same at 31.18. And to recap, this is where we are: the town, the Board of Education, the capital, and the total increase. This budget supports the Board of Education. This budget adds $2.9 million to the town side for some of the public safety enhancements that we spoke about. This budget enhances our current public safety service model to our residents. The budget includes the capital that I mentioned, and again, no tax increase. To recap where we're going, on Monday, May 3rd, there'll be another budget town meeting at 7 o'clock here in the high school. The budget referendum will be Tuesday, May 21st, and all the voting will be at the rec center. Thank you very much.
At this time, our new superintendent, Mr. Stirk, will present the Board of Ed budget. Thank you.
Sorry, everyone. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Stark. I'm the new superintendent of schools here in North Haven. I would also like to reintroduce Pam Mangini. She's the district's new finance and operations, director of finance and operations. So we are both in a rather unique situation this year. We took our prospective roles in March, and the Board of Education has been extremely supportive through our transitions, and Pam and I have been actively digesting and owning the budget over the past month. We will do our best to answer any questions that arise and follow up on any questions that we cannot immediately answer. The approved budget for the current 2018-2019 school year is $53,052,836. Our current proposed budget is $54,590,313. The requested increase is $1,537,477, which equates to 2.9%. Within this proposed budget, we deliberately did not add staff or make any programmatic changes. Teachers have been asked to do so much in regards to curriculum, they now need to continue to get acclimated and build capacity with what is currently in place. I've included this slide to provide a perspective around North Haven's per pupil expenditure as compared to the other towns within our district reference group. As you can see, North Haven falls 11th out of 24 towns within our DIRG. We spent $16,576 per student during the 2017-2018 school year. Within our district reference group, the towns with the highest per pupil expenditure are Old Saybrook, East Granby, and Milford. The towns with the lowest per pupil expenditure are Shelton, Ledyard, and Southington. North Haven falls $3,711 from the highest spending town and $2,165 from the lowest spending town. I included Wallingford in the chart as well because they are part of our DIRG and the closest town to North Haven. So what are we able to accomplish with the proposed 2019-2020 budget? We are able to meet all contractual obligations, preserve certified and non-certified positions, maintain our focus on improving achievement for all students, and continue to strengthen student and staff access to technology. This budget is labor intensive. We can do without things, but we cannot do without people. This slide shows a breakdown of requested increase for the 2019-2020 school year. Medical insurance is a $468,302 increase. Total wage increase of $881,547. We will get more into this on the next slide. Transportation increase of $207,621, and the total actual increases is $1,557,470, which is higher than our overall requested increase. We were able to lower this number to $1,537,477 through planful and purposeful budgeting. Our district has a total of 512 employees. Our contractual increases total $881,547. This number includes increases for administrators, certified staff, and certified stipends, as well as non-certified staff and support staff, such as nurses, clerical maintenance, etc. Our current transportation increase stands at $207,621. This reflects a 4% contracted increase for all M&J transportation. An increase in transportation costs for students in the district's transition program and an increase in our special education out-of-district placements. A few additional notes around transportation. Currently, we are part of a transportation collaborative with ACES. This collaborative consolidates some of our special education busing and provides savings in transportation. Our contract with M&J is up on July 31st, 2020, and we will be going out to bid prior to that date. The creation of the 18 to 21-year-old transition program has saved money overall. However, the students go out to work in the community as part of this program. The out-of-district placements are done by a case-by-case basis and can vary greatly from year to year. The district priorities within this budget are to meet all contractual obligations, to preserve certified and non-certified staff, to continue to improve student achievement, and to increase student access to technology. This slide shows some of the requests that have been proposed within this budget. We plan to install clear touch TVs in the high school. These TVs would replace smart boards and Eno boards that are currently in place. These boards are about 13 years old and they are no longer being made. These TVs are also going to be placed in large areas within the elementary schools, such as libraries, gymnasiums, and conference rooms. Our overall district priorities are as follows: to strengthen curriculum, instruction, and student assessment, to provide high-quality professional development, to increase the use of student performance data to inform decisions about teaching and learning, and to increase staff and student access to technology. I believe within this budget, we are able to accomplish each of those priorities. Once again, we will be able to accomplish the following through this proposed budget: meet all contractual obligations, preserve certified and non-certified staff, maintain our focus on improving the achievement of all students, and continue to strengthen student and staff access to technology. Thank you for your time tonight and your continued support.
He's just a little bit taller than me. Thank you, Mr. Stirk, and thank you, Mr. Frieda. At this time, I'd like to open up the comment and question portion of our public hearing, keeping in mind that we want to be fair to everyone. So how we'd like you to do it is come forward. We only have the one microphone this time, so the microphone here before the stage. Come forward, please tell us your name and your address, and please keep your comments between 5 and 10 minutes. And you can direct your comments to whomever you feel is the most appropriate. Thank you. Mrs. Boehme.
Good evening, everyone. Sally Boehme, 5 Blossom Drive. We need to control spending. Although a 0 increase in the mill rate seems like an ultimate goal of any municipal budget, we have a real chance to give the taxpayers a break and reduce the mill rate in this budget. We've seen mill rate reductions in other area towns like Seymour, Milford, and East Haven. In the 17-18 fiscal year, we had a chance to give the North Haven taxpayers a break and reduce the mill rate. But this administration kept a certain revenue source out of the budget, a source specifically of $1.4 million in funding from the state. I knew we'd get it, they knew we'd get it, and we did get it. And an opportunity to reduce the mill rate was lost. Let's not lose another opportunity. In recent months, Mr. Frieda has warned of the real possibility of losing significant state funding in the near future. Currently, there are many state budget proposals and unfunded mandates under consideration at the state level. And Mr. Frieda has emphasized the potential detrimental impact on North Haven's fiscal stability. This budget is using $2.5 million from general fund transfers. You could see that on page 7 at the top of the revenue budget. We are also using $1.4 million from a special debt service fund that is referenced on the bottom of page 36 of the town's expenditure budget. These sources of revenue are not always going to be there in those amounts. The $4.9 million increase in spending in this proposed budget is too much. Let's curtail spending, reduce the mill rate, and give the taxpayers of North Haven the relief they deserve. We must be fiscally conservative in these uncertain times. At the March 20th Board of Finance meeting, I suggested cuts of about $817,000. And I stand by those cuts, and I urge the Board of Finance members to look harder for even more. I do have one change in my position, and that is regarding the $300,000 capital item for the used ladder truck in the fire department portion of the capital budget on page 38. In recent days, through emails back and forth with the fire chief, I realized this used ladder truck would replace the 2001 Pierce ladder currently at Northeast. It needs replacing. So we will be maintaining only 2 ladders in that fleet. A chart in the chief's workshop presentation said this ladder truck would replace engine 5, which is already out of service. Now that this misunderstanding has been clarified, I support the purchase of this $300,000 used ladder truck. Let's just hope we get a good one. The purchase of the demo engine in 2014 didn't go so well. So I support this used ladder, but I urge the Board of Finance members to remove it from the capital budget and away from the mill rate calculation. The Board of Finance did this last year with several major capital purchases for public works, and we were able to use MRSA waivers to purchase several public works vehicles from this special fund. We could do the same for the purchase of this used ladder truck and help reduce the mill rate at the same time. So let's talk more about the fire department. I would not want to disappoint all the firefighters who are here tonight, who were instructed to be here in their Class A uniforms because the 3rd Select Woman, Sally Buemi, is supposedly against the fire department. You all look great. I am not against the fire department. I have supported every purchase of fire apparatus since I joined the Board of Selectmen. And I am sick of hearing how the fire department is always picked on, that only the fire department is scrutinized so closely and criticized for their requests. That is not true, especially for me. I have had issues with Public Works, the building department, and my fights with the Board of Ed are well known. I am not against the fire department or any other department. I am for prudent spending, careful spending, and I am for keeping the mill rate as low as possible. But there is no question that the fire department has been the focus of lots of attention last budget season as well as this season. For one thing, last year, the fire chief requested 16 new firefighters over a 2-year period. That is a 50% increase in staffing, ladies and gentlemen. So what do they expect? At the January 19th Board of Finance workshop, the chief acknowledged it might have been a mistake to ask for so much in such a short time. And there might be other reasons why the fire department has been under scrutiny lately. Looking at some of recent year-end statistics, for example, in 17-18 fiscal year, the fire department was over budget 9%. The police department, which also operates 24/7, was under budget 1.9%. In fiscal year 16-17, the fire department again was over 9.9%. The police were under 2.1%. And that trend continues as you go back in time. And I have all the year-end reports from the last 10 years with me tonight if anyone wants to verify my statistics. And the overtime line item might be another reason for close scrutiny of the fire department. The Board of Finance has had many discussions about fire department overtime, which hit $799,000 in the 17-18 fiscal year. And with the hiring of more firefighters, overtime costs will continue to increase. The chief acknowledged this fact at a recent fire commission meeting. The more people you have working, the more vacation and sick time that must be covered at the overtime rate. In light of the chief's request, I spent hundreds of hours researching fire department operations, and I consulted with fire officials here in North Haven and throughout the state. Many towns with similar population have no career firefighters. They rely exclusively on volunteers for fire suppression, and they have private contractors like AMR or hunters for emergency medical services. I have serious concerns about hiring new firefighters, specifically how many we need and how they should be deployed to meet the growing number of medical calls in our aging community. And let's remember that tragic, fatal incident in August of 2017, which prompted the call to hire more firefighters. In that event, all firefighters were on duty at a house fire when the medical call came in, so no fire department personnel were available to go to that medical call. And the discussions for more fire department personnel began. At the 2018 Board of Finance workshop, the chief requested 8 firefighters for the current fiscal year. The Board of Finance gave them 0, and instead, Mr. Frieda last April formed a study group that included Mr. Hallahan and Mr. Monaco, two members of the Board of Finance, to study fire department operations and make recommendations. Last year, I initially advocated for a compromise of hiring 4 new firefighters, but the fire department rejected my suggestion. I continued to research, and a North Haven Fire Department employee contacted me and recommended something called weighted day duty. I had never heard of it, which means putting extra people on duty to supplement the existing 8-man shift, Monday through Friday during the day. So I then proposed hiring 2 firefighters using weighted day duty as firefighter paramedics to work a day shift. The theory is to have extra people working when many, not all, but many of the overlapping medical calls come in. I understand that 911 calls, of course, can happen anytime, nights, weekends, but I was told that the Divine Street Yale facilities and other doctor offices like 100 Broadway are draining the fire department during the workday. These facilities are closed on nights and weekends when the
Ms.
8-man
Blaney,
shift would
one
still
more
be
minute.
on duty as usual. Yes,
1 more minute.
sorry?
1 more minute. You've spoke for 9 minutes at this point.
Well, the first selectman spoke for 14, so I'll
The first
be-
selectman wasn't giving comment or questions. He was presenting the budget.
Okay.
And I've asked nicely to limit 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. As I mentioned, the study group from Mr. Hallahan, will I be able to finish my speech when everyone else talks?
As I've mentioned, you can
Yes.
come up again
Okay.
if you let me finish.
Okay.
You can come up again when everyone else has had a turn.
Okay. The special day shift seems like a good idea and the most cost-effective first step to addressing the problem of overlapping medical calls. Last year at his workshop, the chief gave 4 examples of overlapping calls, and 3 were during the workday. I reminded the chief of this fact 2 months ago, and he laughed and said, yeah, that's why I kept them out of my workshop this year. So he proved my point. I mentioned the study group. Mr. Hallahan and Mr. Monaco worked tirelessly researching and studying fire department calls. In November of 28, they issued their recommendations, and lo and behold, they came to the same conclusion I reached last year. A Monday through Friday day shift with 2 new firefighters was all we needed, according to the study group. The union was not willing to amend their collective bargaining agreement to allow this type of shift.
That's 10 minutes.
Okay, I will
Who's the
finish.
next person who would like to speak?
I'll finish after everyone has talked.
Would anyone else like to speak or ask questions tonight? If so, please come forward. Thank you.
Age before beauty, as it were. I am Fritz Betker from 290 Spring Road. I have some comments on the North Haven Citizen articles from Friday, March 29th, 2019. But before I begin, let me heartily endorse every single comment that Ms. Boehme made. Regarding the capital budget increase of 2.8 million, Mr. Frieda on page 1 of this article, Finance Board proposing 4.9% budget increase. He confided that he has been preparing for years for this day. That's very comforting. I do want to admit, however, that unlike Mr. Frieda, who has much more financial expertise than I ever will, I have failed to prepare for this increase. I'm tapped out. I do not have the $2.8 million he is prepared to spend, nor any significant fraction thereof. A little bit down the page, Mr. Frieda again summons the mantra of our wonderful AAA bond rating by assuring us that this horrendously massive increase would be a heck of a lot worse if we weren't collecting the premiums from past bondings. So thank God for premiums, which, if nothing else, shield us from the knowledge that we've spent ourselves into oblivion. He reassures us that the fears I delineate here are groundless by pointing out that we are under-leveraged, presumably in comparison with other towns, and he would be perfectly correct in saying so. We are indeed under-leveraged in comparison with many other towns like Hamden, Bridgeport, Hartford, Detroit, Flint, Michigan, Sacramento, California. By the way, anybody thinking of buying a home in Detroit this year? Two-family homes are selling in Detroit for $30,000. Sounds like a deal to me. I'm not going to be given time to ridicule the logic of any outrageous spending increase in this budget, like the Board of Education demand for another $1.5 million, other than to remind the more fiscally prudent among you that these were the savants that talked you into armed anti-terrorist guards in all your elementary schools last year. Please don't reward that kind of propaganda. Just say no. I told the fire chief some time back that his more reasonable requests for tangible resources would be set aside for the Columbine boogeymen that the more imaginative school teachers would summon. Last year, that meager prophecy came to pass. Your schools are now theoretically protected from violent terrorist guerrilla bombings. However, they are not proof against the financial ruin which will surely ensue if you treat every projected economic development exercise as a license to spend more than said development will generate in revenue. On to the fire department article by Ms. Boemi, where it is noted that the surge in call volume comes largely from the increase in medical requests. Though they are not demanding an awful lot of money with no questions asked, they are not lacking the statistics to back all of these things up. Medical calls, largely from our local hospital branch on Devine Street, paradoxically enough, put extra stress on the department and thus you, the taxpayer. Fortunately, after some research, I have come up with a simple answer to this difficulty. It seems there are private concerns existing in this country who have devoted themselves exclusively to the delivery of emergency medical services on premises. They are called ambulances. They work by contract. They pay their own liability insurance. They don't have built-in cost of living increases, and they charge us nothing for their pensions. Mr. Frieda assures us our taxes won't go up this year. However, whether for good or ill, I'll probably still be here next year and the year after. The piper is still going to show up annually at my doorstep waiting to be paid. $2 million of next year's bill will be coming out of our general fund. That leaves us $2 million short for the next year. Where are we getting that? From the Selectman's office, the sound of crickets. Selectman Boemi's latest newspaper column, which our local rag of record, the North Haven Citizen, took the liberty of editing for content, explains how the facts and figures presented to our Board of Finance by her and Citizen Nancy Barrett are never contradicted, but are dismissed by admonitions that their opinions have been debunked by experts, shadowy figures that do not counter their arguments by fact of their own, but merely point to their own expertise. Experts, I must remind you, assured you in the 1930s that cocaine was good for your digestion. In the 40s, that tobacco was a great stress reliever. Experts in the 50s told you that nuclear explosives could be defended against by hiding under a desk, and in the 60s that the Vietnam War would strengthen our democracy. God save us from the experts. In short, my recommendations on this upcoming vote, should any be injudicious enough to ask, bottom line, next time you sit at your desk with your checkbook out, remember there's only one expert in how to spend your money. You can meet him or her in your bathroom mirror. Don't let these guys take you for a ride in their fire trucks of the future. When it comes to any spending increase, don't just vote no. Vote hell no. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to speak? Come forward, please. Thank you.
Hello? You unfortunately have to hear another Betker. My name is Heidi Betker. I live at 45 Beach Street. I just have a short statement. I'm gonna take my glasses off. Good evening. I recognize through inflation that certain costs do rise. However, my main concern is focused on the pattern of continual budget increase requests year after year that are presented to the Town of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. Not just because of inflation factors, but rather through the alleged need of the town departments to increase their manpower and their resources. Heads of every department normally submit an exaggerated percentage increase and expected cut made by the Board of Finance. These cuts are made, but don't forget, the departments will wind up with an increase. Nobody even tries to admit that certain line items in their budget were not being fully used and would dare to present a 0% increase or a very modest increase. Once the Pandora's box is opened, it can't be closed. Not addressing the real necessities to maintain the status quo, the departments focus on further expansion, more manpower, more resources. Even when the town is offered to fund additional firemen, this department is holding out for more. We are contracted out to AMR, and we will continue to use their services. And yet the town departments want to create an in-house emergency response team. Again, more manpower and added expense. Need a replacement fire engine? Put that in your budget as a line item and not have the town raid our contingency fund. Utilize the volunteer firemen, support them, and train however many firemen as paramedics so that requirement and necessity is accomplished. Relying on committees composed of experts to address their department's budget and needs makes sense only if not creating a fox in the henhouse scenario. We are adding to our debt. We have to deal with paying off our existing debt. As excellent as Mr. Frieda is in our business dealings and creating more revenue, it will not always match the budget without a mill rate increase. If these requested advances in more manpower and resources are not held in check, the taxpayers, especially those with fixed incomes, will not be able to reside in North Haven anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Nancy Barrett. I live on Crestview Drive. So I'd like to highlight just a few of the details that pertain to this budget that were not revealed in the presentation tonight. So I'm sure many of you have heard the presentations given by Mr. Frieda as well as read in the paper. Several of the quotes from Mr. Frieda, including, and I quote, "The proposed $103.8 million budget is a $4.9 million increase over last fiscal year, $2.8 million of which is due to increased debt service, and the total debt obligation went from $6.6 million to $9.4 million. With the exception of the budget total, none of the other figures cited by Mr. Frieda are accurate or reflected in this budget, and I'll tell you why. So, Mr. Swienkowski, could you please clarify what is the total debt for 2019 and 20?
Total debt is just around 9.2 million.
So not 9.4, as Mr. Frieda cited.
No, but as I had said in your email, I
Yes.
probably quoted that to him early on in the process, so I probably gave him the 9.4 when it was
Right.
early on. So
In fact, the number that you quoted to me in the email was $9,149,185. So I consider that to be 9.1. So can you tell me, Mr. Swienkowski, where in our budget can you find that number? Where is it listed as
In
an
the budget-
expenditure line in the budget?
the budget, this budget that we're looking at tonight,
Yes.
only reflects the 7.6 million that's paid out of the general fund. There are funds, the $1.4 million, as it notes on page 36, is paid out of the debt service fund. In addition to that, the difference of about 63,000 is paid out of the police capital project, similarly to what we've done with the middle school over the past 3 years.
Okay, so you answered my next question. So it's not 9.4 million, it's 9.1 million. It is not reflected in this budget. And in fact, the debt obligation, both principal and interest, that is included in this budget is $7.7 million. And that's included on page 36 if you're interested in looking. And again, Mr. Swienkowski, what is the incremental increase in the debt from this current fiscal year to next fiscal year?
In the budget, it's around $1 million.
Yes, $1 million. So again, not the $2.8 million that Mr. Frieda is quoted as saying.
But then again, the general fund budget doesn't include all the debt, like as it hasn't in the past 2 or 3 years.
So this makes sense, right? Because if what Mr. Frieda claimed was true, and the debt increase were 2.8 million out of the 4.9 million increase in the budget, that means the remainder, the $2.1 million, would have to cover all of the other budget increases combined. And that just can't be true. If you just look at the increase to the BOE, police, and fire, it's well over $2.6 million. So lastly, is it true that the extra $1 million in debt increase, when divided by the $4.9 million in the budget increase, actually is 21%? It's not the 56% that Mr. Frieda has quoted?
Right.
Okay, 21%. So again, you mentioned the footnote on page 36 that is listed as debt service reserve fund. Just to clarify, Mr. Swienkowski, is that actually the allocation from the debt service fund that was created at the February Board of Finance meeting to collect premiums from bond issuance and use it to pay debt?
The debt service fund that was created by the Board of Finance,
Yes.
out of that will come $1.4 million.
But again, on the bottom of page 36, it is listed as debt service reserve fund, not debt service fund.
Well, I think I corrected that. in
So
the
that
revised copies.
has been corrected, thank you. And according to the resolution passed by the Board of Finance, if the debt service fund were not created, then those, quote, bond premiums would just stay in the capital project that it was borrowed for, and once the project is completed, would flow right back into the general fund. Is that correct, Mr.
Right,
Swienkowski?
but when your debt increases, it makes sense to use your debt premium to keep the debt in line.
Okay, so could you please point me to the place in the budget packet that shows 3 things? The total balance of the debt service fund, which of course is just another special fund, the debt service funding entry as a form of revenue, and the debt service fund expenditure line item that is used to offset the debt obligation for 2019-20.
None of those items are going to be in the budget.
None.
It's
None.
no
Thank you.
different than
Thank
having
you.
the money paid out of the police project or the middle school project, and neither of those items have been in the budget over the past few years.
So just to confirm, the accumulating bond premiums that are funding part of the 2019-20 debt payment are not actually included in this $103.8 million budget. Is that correct?
They're in a separate fund.
They are not included in this budget as either revenue or expenditure.
Because they're in the debt service fund.
Correct. So the answer is yes. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we need to think about this debt service fund like a mattress full of cash, right? It is completely off the books. It is not listed as a source of revenue like other special funds, or it is not listed as a line item expenditure. The bottom line is that the debt service fund was created just like a month and a half ago so that Mr. Swienkowski would have immediate access to the bond premiums, again, off the books, and avoid having to have a $4 million transfer from the general fund rather than a $2.525 million increase. And so, one last question about the debt service fund, Mr. Swienkowski. Could you tell me what is the current debt service fund balance? And is $1.4 million a year available to pay off debt in the future? And for how many years?
Right now, we're using $1.4 million out of the debt service fund for this year.
Yep.
There's probably another $400,000 or $500,000 available for the future, and then we'll have another bond income November. We'll probably pick up additional premium. But keep in mind, this debt service fund can only be used to fund debt, nothing else. So that's why we're using it to pay debt only.
So we currently only have another $500,000 after this allocation of $1.4 million. Okay, thank you for answering that. So regarding the general fund, is it accurate to say that $2,525,000 in general fund revenue has been earmarked to support the 2019-20 budget? Is that fair?
There's $1,400,000 that's from general fund reserves for debt that we're using, and the difference is from fund balance.
So you have split into two revenue line items, what is historically one line item. You have unrestricted fund balance and general fund debt reserves, but they both are basically coming from our general fund. Is that correct?
We got to keep in mind that the general fund total fund balance includes more than unappropriated fund balance. It also includes debt reserves, assigned items, and various other items. So the debt reserve there is coming from the general fund, is going to be used in this budget. That's another $1 million.
So then what is the difference between general fund debt reserves on page 6 and appropriated on page 7? None.
Nothing.
No, they're exactly the same. And what is the difference between general fund debt reserves on page 6 and the debt service fund listed on page 36? They're both $1.4 million.
The general fund debt reserves in the budget are from accumulated of funding sources over the past number of years. The premiums that from the bond proceeds are what are in the debt service fund.
So
different things.
Again, general fund debt reserves is our general fund. It is in our fund balance, and the debt service fund is completely off the books. So the general fund has taken several hits this year. So $400,000 for the replacement of fire equipment due to the Defco Park fire, $750,000 for the new fire engine purchase, and $2.525 million for the 1920 budget, for a total of $3,675,000. So can we safely use that much from our fund balance without jeopardizing the AAA rating that Mr. Frieda often references as essential to our fiscal stability?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the Defco Park issue. We're still waiting for the insurance proceeds on that, and once that comes in, that'll offset all the money we've spent. So
in the future, it
assured
will offset it,
about
but
that,
currently it is withdrawn from that account, right?
For the moment.
For the moment,
But
I
we
understand.
expect those proceeds in any day. So.
I understand.
1 minute warning.
So do we have $8.3 million in our general fund in order to maintain our AAA bond rating?
At some point, you might have to dip below it,
So
like
current-
you did for the to buy the fire
So
truck.
based upon this
But
budget
it-
and all the accumulated expenditures, yes. Okay, and
Yeah,
one
it's
last
just-
question, again, related to this general fund. Do you expect a surplus in the current fiscal year, and roughly how much do you expect?
Yes, we do expect a surplus, and we're currently working on that, and it's hopefully,
Are most of the taxes already in? No. Okay, all right, so I will continue after everyone else has spoken. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next? Come forward, please, to the microphone. Thank you.
Just a moment. Good evening. My name is Stephen Irons. I'm a resident of 34 Clintonville Road, and I'm a firefighter at the West Ridge Company 3. Oh. Okay. Did that wake you up? That's the sound that woke me up at 3 a.m. one night in 2016. Dispatcher came on with the report of a possible structure fire at an address in my district. I stumbled out of bed and in the dark, so I wouldn't disturb my wife, struggled into some clothes, hoping my underwear was on correctly. I dashed downstairs, and as I pulled out of the driveway, the dispatcher came on again, saying the police had arrived and confirmed heavy fire at the front of the house. Engine 1 and Tower 1 had signed on. My pulse quickened again, and I forgot about my underwear. As it happened, my route to the firehouse took me right by the fire, and I saw Engine 1 and Tower 1 pulling up to a house where the entire front porch was engulfed in flames. My pulse quickened again. A few minutes later, I pulled into the station and raced to put on my gear, joining 3 others of my fellow company volunteers. We signed on and pulled out. Incident command at the scene notified us to take a hydrant and bring water to Engine 1, which was supplying water from their onboard tank to the attack team. Arriving on scene, we hooked up to the hydrant and brought water to Engine 1. We donned our air packs and reported to the incident command post. By this time, the main body of fire had been extinguished, but it had migrated to the attic and into some of the wall spaces. We were sent in to track it down and extinguish it. I remember climbing the stairs with my tools and air pack, and as I made my way down the hallway to the bedroom, I looked up and I saw flames dancing along the ceiling. Never mind what my pulse was. We spent the rest of the night making sure the remainder of the fire was out, spraying water into attic spaces and into holes in the walls that we made. One of the last things I did was retrieve a cell phone of one of the residents from a room that had been spared direct damage from the heat and water. In the morning, we packed up our hose and equipment and returned to the station. I went home, washed up, checked my underwear one last time, then I went to work. I tell this story to give you some context so you understand what can go on a day or night when a budget is not being voted on. The people who make up the fire service are a little odd. We don't do it just for the money, or any money in some cases. Yet it is a job that can be boring and tedious for long stretches and then terrifying and dangerous at random intervals. As a result, we don't tend to complain too loudly when the fire engine gets old or our gear gets a little tattered. We just want rigorous training, the proper equipment, and be at the fire when we're needed. However, it is a new world. There are national standards and guidelines for fire and firefighter protection that the town of North Haven is not meeting. Standards that lay out when fire apparatus should be retired. Standards that address the growing evidence of increased cancer risk from our gear that we cannot clean without going out of service because we don't have a second set to use while our first set is being washed. Standards that dictate the annual training we must complete to remain certified, and many others. Many of you have studied this issue in order to better understand the reasons why the current fire administration is requesting a budget increase, new fire apparatus, and additional personnel, and I commend you for your desire to ensure our tax money is spent wisely. However, I ask the town, has the current fire administration been anything but transparent about what they want to do and why? Is it really outlandish what they're asking for? What we, the volunteers, are asking for? Are you sure that you understand the overall vision and the constraints that they must work with? The chief and his deputies have been open with us, and we support his requests. They are dedicating resources, equipment, and time to the volunteers because volunteers save the department money, save the town money, and save us money. And the more volunteers you have, the more money we'll save. They are doing this so that the volunteer and career firefighters work together more closely and efficiently. They are doing this so that all of us are trained at the same high standard. And they are doing this so that anyone who's thinking of being a volunteer or thinking of a career in firefighting will think of North Haven first. We need career firefighters in modern North Haven, but we need volunteers too, especially if you like your property taxes the way they are, or perhaps lower, apparently. If you take away our opportunities for meaningful training, if you don't replace fire engines that are older than my 20-year-old daughter, if you take away our second set of protective gear, if you take away the things that the chief and his deputies are trying to provide to us that makes being a volunteer in North Haven one of the best places to do it, then you will have fewer and fewer volunteers every year. And these missing volunteers will have to be replaced by more paid firefighters. I would like to conclude with the following request. The next time you're considering coming to a budget or fire commission meeting to suggest a new and clever way of organizing the fire department, consider coming by any of our firehouses instead. For once. We'll gladly show you around. We're there every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Talk to us, have a look at our engines and equipment, find out what it's like on the ground. In fact, consider volunteering yourself, or encourage your daughter or son, or brother or sister to volunteer. It can be a fulfilling way to give back to the town we all live in. Or it can serve as a stepping stone to a career in the fire service, a job that will not be outsourced to China. In fact, one of the firefighters on the engine that night in 2016 with me is now a firefighter right here in the town of North Haven, the first one in many years. So when it comes time to vote, I would like you to think about the incident I just described and the many others, big and small, that we have responded to in the years since, and consider the men and women, both career and volunteer, who responded in our current aging apparatus, the thousands of hours of mandated training that we bring to bear, the command staff that coordinated the dozens of responding firefighters and directed the strategy that saved most of that house. And vote as you must. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Besides those who've already spoken, anyone else like to come up for the first time? Please come forward. Mrs. White?
Mary White, Summer Lane. I would like to ask a question about the fund balance. I didn't really hear the answer. Can you tell me, I know some money had to be used from the fund balance to make purchases that we badly needed. I was wondering, what is the percentage of the fund balance now? Is it exactly 8%? Is it over 8%? If so, how much is it over?
Right now, it's slightly under 8%, at around 7.8%.
7.8%, okay. And I understand that the fund balance is a fluid situation. So with that being said, in 2018, the NFPA released NFPA 3000 standards, which calls for a more aggressive role for firefighters with active, hostile, active shooter scenes. They now go in, whereas they used to wait until law enforcement secured the scene. Okay, so the request for the sets of the ballistic vests and helmets for the fire department for $24,000, that was not included in the budget. So we should recall that Parkland, Columbine, Sandy Hook, these are not cities where the terrible shootings occurred. They are the suburbs. Unfortunately, there are some disturbed individuals out there. Some of you may or may not be aware, but recently posted on Snapchat was a North Haven Middle School student waving a gun. It ended up not being a threat, as it was an air gun. What if it was a real gun? What if there was a threat in our middle school or our high school? Don't you think our firefighters deserve to have the protective equipment so they can go in and save the children in the event of a violent scene? So I was wondering if the fund balance, in the fluid manner in which it is, if it does reach that level where it's a little bit above the 8%, if you would consider putting the $24,000 in the budget for the ballistic vests and helmets. Okay. And I would like to thank the department heads for presenting thoughtful budgets. I'd like to thank the Board of Finance and the Board of Finance Fire Subcommittee for all their work and recognition of the fire department needs and funding of the fire department and the police department. I would like to thank our first responders, the fire and police. You are appreciated. I'm so very happy steps, purchases, hires are taking place, all of which are to help protect the public's health, safety, and welfare. In the end, life is what matters most. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. White. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Jenny Caldwell, 69 Kimberly Circle. I just want to get up and advocate for the fire department as somebody who woke up with my apartment on fire in the middle of the night. Having a fire department that was able to get to my apartment within a few minutes made the difference between having a loss of a couple of my pets versus having those animals saved. It is very concerning to me that the firehouse by my house is not staffed. And I think that I'm glad we're adding 2 firemen, but I heard from the chief that we need more than that, and I would really like for the town to take a good look at our budget and look at our budget priorities, because one of the top budget priorities should be to have safety in our town. And if your house is on fire and there are not firefighters there to get to you quickly, it can make the difference between life and death. So I cannot get support enough that we need firefighters and we need our firehouses staffed so that the fire department, whether it's a medical emergency or a fire, can get to the houses quickly. And I think it's wonderful we have volunteers, but I think there needs to be a combination of both. I know that there's been talk about towns that only have volunteers. I wouldn't want to live in a town that only has volunteer firefighters, not because the volunteers aren't wonderful, but they just are not always available as quickly as you would need them there. So anyway, that's my biggest concern with the budget, is I would like to see more additional firefighters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell. Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Brian Jose, 47 Spring Road. I came here tonight to speak to you from kind of a unique perspective. I'm a 35-year town resident. I have 3 kids in the high school. I'm also a 27-year fire and EMS professional. My background in the fire service is I served for the New Haven Fire Department for over 20 years. I was retired as a battalion chief, and in my last year on the job, I was an acting deputy chief, which means I was in charge of the whole city when I was working. When I left New Haven, I came to North Haven and volunteered at Montaouise. I was a firefighter and a first lieutenant for the short time that I was there before I went on to my current job at the University of Connecticut Fire Department. A couple of things that I want to clarify on and show my support to the fire department and the fire chief are one thing in particular is your manpower. The manpower increases that the chief asked for are not off base. The requirements for structural firefighting in a fire in a residence, a single family residence, is 15 people if you have a ladder company in service, which we do here. It's 28 people for a strip mall or a garden apartment or a condo type structure. So if you look at some of the areas around town with the structures that we have, the minimum requirements sometimes are not being met. So the chief's request for manpower is on the money. I had the opportunity, like I said, to volunteer with Monowese for a little while, and the volunteer firefighters in this town are some of the most dedicated fire service professionals I've ever worked with. I've also had the opportunity to grow up with and be friends with quite a great amount of the career firefighters in town who also do a phenomenal job. The fact of the matter is that standards are changing, the times are changing, and the department has pretty much stayed the same as far as manpower for the last, as long as I can remember, really, the last 35 years that I've been paying attention. And the chief's increase in manpower is not inaccurate. The next thing I want to hit on is the paramedic service. The paramedic and ALS interventions that paramedics provide at the time of a cardiac arrest or a major emergency is the thing we should be looking at. How long it takes to start an ALS intervention on a patient is something that needs to be looked at, and staffing paramedics at the Monowese Firehouse makes the most sense. That incident that was spoken about before of the fire and the medical simultaneously happening is going to happen more and more and more, especially with 26% of the call volume happening at the same time. It's inevitable that it's going to happen again, and it's inevitable that there's going to be a loss of life if there's not an increase made in the manpower and the paramedic service. To provide a paramedic engine company to provide those services is the best way to go for the town. If you look at the development on Livingston Gardens from Middletown Avenue, that development, those structures are so close together that if you have a fire in one of those structures that gets ahead of the fire department before they arrive, you're going to lose 3 of those structures. So to have that dual functioning paramedic engine company responding to that would greatly reduce the chance of that happening. The development in the town and the economic development has been phenomenal. The fire service needs to get out ahead of that and stay ahead of that so we don't have a major catastrophe. The last thing I want to hit on, which was hit on by Mrs. White, was the active shooter. In the 60s and 70s, EMS was introduced into the fire service. In the 80s and 90s, it was hazardous materials. Post 9/11, it was a revamping of hazardous materials and weapons of mass destruction. And now it's active shooter incidents. They're happening on Main Street, USA. What is more Main Street, USA than Washington Avenue, than Universal Drive? It's not only our schools, which are obviously our most important, it's the movie theater. It's Main Street. It's Main Street, USA, and it's right here. So the chief's requests and the fire department's requests are accurate. We have a top-notch fire service here. I've had the opportunity to be involved with several different organizations, and the chiefs of this department are right at the cream of the crop. They're the best. Our career staff in the fire department, again, they're tremendous. They need the tools and the equipment to do the job and to do it safely and to protect us and protect your loved ones. And I want to end on this note. I've been involved in 27 years in the fire service, and one of the engines, which I had the honor to drive at Monowese Firehouse, has been serving longer than I have. So support your firefighters.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone like to speak? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kurt Andrews. I am a volunteer at Northeast. I joined the department in 1987, and all of the volunteers that are here today volunteered to be here. We did not get an order to be here. We volunteered to do our time, and we volunteered to come here because we care about the town. A couple of different things I want to touch on. I served as an officer in our company, and I currently serve as the lieutenant in charge of the fire police in town. There's 11 of us, and when I joined the fire department, there were about 100 of us. Today, there's 50 of us. Think about that for a second. There's half, and our call volume has gone up by 100% in that time since I joined. That's a big difference. That's why we need to have some more career firefighters in town. I've also worked for every single career fire chief in town that we've ever had, from Chief Rosadini to Chief Januszewski. I can tell you that the volunteers that are here today and the career firefighters will tell you that the career staff, the chief staff that we have in this department is the best that we've ever had. The addition that this town made and the commitment that they made a couple of years ago to hire Chief Martis to be our training officer and our deputy chief of operations was spot on. And our training has been the best that it's ever been, and we're a lot safer on the fire ground. I also want to talk about, we mentioned earlier, the fire that we had on Thanksgiving at Parker Hannafin. That was the first fire since ladder truck 2 went into service at Northeast that we had the capability to have 2 ladder trucks operating at a major scene. That fire almost got away from us, and it could have been disastrous. But because we had the 2 ladder trucks in service, our guys were safer, and they were able to attack that fire and save not only the people, but also the building and the jobs with Parker Hannafin. They did a phenomenal job. There's been a group of folks, and I appreciate the folks that are taking time to dig into the department and spend some time studying it. Our career chiefs have over 50 years of experience in the fire service, and they understand what we're capable of doing and what we need to do. And I would appreciate the town supporting the chiefs in what they're asking to do. They know better than lay people do. The questions, the discourse is all great, but I don't see the scrutiny of the Public Works Department. I don't see the scrutiny of Chief McLaughlin and his department as much as there is in the fire department. I don't understand why all of a sudden there's the scrutiny. The other thing that I want to touch on real quick is, as has been mentioned, the 2001 ladder truck is in badly need to be replaced. Sally Buemi was at our firehouse a month or 2 ago for a fire commission meeting, and I asked her to stand up and put her hand through the wheel well because there's a hole where it's rusted through. Folks, we can do better than that. The chief has given you an opportunity to replace that for $300,000. I would suggest that you do that. I want to leave you with, and there's one other thing I want to mention. This past summer, we had an incident up on Surrey Hill, and shortly thereafter, there was a motor vehicle accident on I-91, and my compatriots at Truck 2 from Northeast were called to I-91 and were able to use their training as a truck company to rescue somebody and pull them up with a basket and a ladder that was down in the gully. That's something that my guys wouldn't be able to do a year and a half ago. Because of the changes that the department's made under Chief Januszewski, our guys are being trained to do different things, and they're excited about what they're doing. There's excitement in the volunteer fire department. We're trying to grow the department to save your tax dollars. I want to leave you with one thought. When we put our right hand up and we swear that we're going to protect the town and we're going to do what we need to do, I keep telling my guys that when you folks dial 911, it's generally speaking, it's your worst day. And we're there to do what we can to mitigate it. If we don't have the tools to do it, We can't do it. And right now, our tools are lacking. We need your help. We need your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak for the first time?
My name is Cody Dudek, 1 Great Meadow Drive, firefighter at Mono East Company 2, North Haven Fire Department. I am 23 years old, and yet I'm one of the most senior guys at my department. Our volunteers are great. These are young kids dedicating their time away from their families and risking their lives to protect everyone here. All we are asking for is the equipment and apparatus to get us safely to the fire, be able to put it out safely so we can save you and we can go safely back to our families. Thank you.
Anyone else before I start returning to the people who have already talked? This is your opportunity. Hi, thank you, sir. Come forward, please.
Good evening, Pat Nuzzolo, 7 Mansfield Road, Chairman of the North Haven Fire Commission. I'd like to first of all thank the Board of Finance for the effort that all of them have put together with this budget. It's a daunting task. I said that during our workshop, and I mean it sincerely. To come up with a budget that has a 0 tax increase and supporting all of the town departments is a significant task, and I certainly like to thank them. Publicly, again, I would like to thank the subcommittee of the Board of Finance that created their version of what their thoughts and ideas would be for the North Haven Fire Department. We certainly, as a fire commission, came up with a counter proposal that is really never spoken about. And there was a great deal of effort and logic that went into that discussion in order to attempt to provide the quality customer service to the residents and business owners and visitors of our town, at the same time attempting to keep in mind the cost to our taxpayers. We're conscious of the cost. We're taxpayers ourselves. Many of us are on fixed incomes as well. Our volunteers volunteer their services at no cost to us. Our paid staff provide a tremendous service for us. And we have 8 paid firefighters per shift that do a magnificent job utilizing the same 3 apparatus that we've had for the last 45 years. We have a rescue, we have a ladder truck, and we have a pumper. Those are the 3 full-time vehicles that we have for each and every staff shift. What we're asking for and what this budget allows is us an opportunity to bring 2 additional firefighters on board that will assist us tremendously. And I'm deeply appreciative of Mike Frieda and the Board of Finance considering a plan to grow our department over the next couple of years so that we could phase in the number of firefighters that we need in order to accomplish the goal of saving your home in the event your home is on fire. We do not want to be a defensive department where we just sit back, pour water on your home, and it burns down to the ground and your insurance company pays for the loss. We want to save your property, we want to save your family, and certainly any of your valuables. That's our mission. And we also swore an oath as elected fire commissioners through the penalty of felony, perjury. Thank you. And we take that seriously. We truly do. So every one of our decisions as elected officials, as a fire commissioner, is done with all of the concerns and consideration of our residents in town. I totally support this budget. I appreciate the effort that has taken place by the Board of Finance. And I have one question for Mr. Swimkowski. There's been a number of questions regarding line items to the budget. It's my understanding that the budget is reviewed by our auditors on an annual basis. Have our auditors seen any issues or concerns as to how you're addressing the budget and how the line items are established?
There were no comments in the audit report regarding that, no.
So I certainly feel that as long as our auditors are in approval of our budget and the way Mr. Swimkowski is administering that and our Board of Finance is overseeing it, certainly that's good enough for me, and hopefully it's good enough for the rest of our residents. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Please come forward. Mr. Criscola?
Good evening, my name is Peter Criscola, 5-4 Fieldstone Court. First and foremost, it's very hard to go after the chairman, did a great job, and all our other firefighters that spoke. And I stand here honored to see all our volunteers and our career men here. No one was asked to come, no one was ordered to come. They came on their own. And I may jump around, I have no notes, so I may jump around a little bit. But first and foremost, whatever I say is not disrespectful to anyone who spoke before me. It's not personal. It's just about the business of the fire department, the safety of this town. We have people that have come forward at meetings in the newspaper to say what they know, what they've learned about, coming to a half a dozen meetings, doing some research, talking to some other firefighters, non-firefighters from other towns, in our own town, they claim. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that what you've acquired from them people or what you've studied from a book is really correct. Practice makes perfect if the practice is perfect. I'm not going to talk about the war, tobacco, cocaine, any of the above. It has nothing to do with our fire department. The important things are the safety of this town. And I'm sure everyone in this room has been on a plane or have heard about stewardess. They tell you the first thing, God forbid something happens, put your mask on first, worry about your child next. Well, if you don't want to worry about the equipment that we have and the apparatus and the manpower we have in the fire department, both career and volunteer, then that's a great mistake. You want to take engines off and you want to replace them with paramedic vehicles, rescue vehicles, ambulance. There's no water, folks, no water. First of all, your ISO rating for your tax, for your insurance will go up. Trust me, you will pay more money on insurance and you'll have less coverage with fire department and fire suppression. You may have medical coverage with AMR or any other group that you people mentioned, but that's not the answer to fire suppression, and that's what we need. We have the best of the best men and women on our department. We have to utilize them, but we also have to equip them. You know, I look around, and again, we go back, and I'm going to jump around. Everybody wants to be a chief. Everybody wants to run the department. I'm the longest sitting commissioner in Connecticut. I'm the longest sitting president of the New Haven County Commissioners. I spend thousands of hours between the fire department, between other events and commission meetings. If the chief was to leave tomorrow and ask me to run the department for one day, I could not do it. Impossible to do. But yeah, we have people that come to a half a dozen meetings, read some books, they want to be a chief. Well, I want everyone in this room to look to your right or left, in front or back, and ask the person next to you what they do for a living. Tell them you want to shadow them for 1 week and you want to take their job. Let's see how you make out. I think the people next to you will laugh at you to think that you want to take their job and you'll do the same to them. This is strictly a fire issue. That's why we have over 60 years of administrative staff, and almost 100 years of commissioners, hours and days, months. So how could anyone just come up here and quote some statistics? It's not real. Yes, we put on 2 men, and I thank Mike Frieda, the Board of Finance. I thank you for your men. I thank you for the ladder truck that we desperately needed. But we need more equipment also. We need more apparatus to get our firemen to the job. But we also need more firefighters. Do I think that 2 are enough? No. We had to be satisfied with 2, but 2 aren't enough. We can't use just a day shift, like someone said earlier. It's not the union that won't bend on their contract. It's not plausible. You can't not use just a day shift. You have to have a separate unit of firefighters, okay? That's what we need. We need at least 2 men on each shift to start. They should be placed, as the young lady said, at Armanoi's headquarters. This way we could have fire suppression at that end of town, which again, the residents deserve, and medical attention at that end of town. That's what I think we're missing. We're hearing people speak at different meetings, articles in the paper, which I'm going to say there was one in the paper that I was very offended by, extremely offended. It accused the fire department and the administrative staff and maybe the commissioners of fudging the overtime. I take that as a personal offense. That is impossible to do. The hours are there, the men are there. You just can't fudge that. And that was, I think, an insult to the department and to the town itself. This is a wonderful town. I'm proud to be here. I look out there, and I'm proud to be a commissioner in this town. And we have a great administration. The monies are there. We're a AAA rated town. Some may say that we may lose the rating for a few months. Well, you know what? We're still in the top 10 towns of 169 towns. We just put a new drone in our fire department, a new all-terrain vehicle, a trailer to transport it, and we just the other night received another donation from a local businessman of $5,800 to buy a carrier that goes in the back so we could transport, God forbid, a victim if we get them in the woods or in the swamp. So this is a great town. Like I said before, people just don't give money because they want to give. They give because they believe in this town. Let's keep it that way, please. Give the chief his way. This is why we've made him the chief. He's doing a great job. I've been here through 4 administrations. 4 administrations. And they get better and better and better. And we are at the best now. So please, listen to the chief. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak for the very first time? Yes, sir. Mr. Testa.
Brian Testa, Maple Apple. I have just one quick question or a couple questions. Mr. Swinkowski, pensions. Are we fully funding pensions both on the Board of Ed and on the town side in this budget?
On the town side, we're funding it based on what the actuarial study requested. So yes, we are.
And on the Board of Ed side?
That's a state function.
State function, so we don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to repeat what a lot of the firemen and commissioners have said. Before moving here in 1986, I was a volunteer in North Branford. North Branford is an all volunteer, and they're probably still all volunteer. I know they are. Great bunch of guys. I've been on that call when that call comes out at 3 o'clock in the morning and there's only 3 of us going to a structure fire or a motor vehicle accident. Just recently, we just had a tragedy on Ridge Road. At the very same time, I mean, the chiefs, fire, police can correct me if I'm wrong. There was another call on Sacker Point Road. Both police and fire went to those calls. At both times, they did not have enough men at both calls. And within, I believe in about 10 minutes, they had another accident on 91. So within 10 minutes, we had 3 calls. We had a tragedy, we had a situation with the police that the fire had to go to, and then you had a third call. This all started at around 5:30, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Our fire department is stretched. Our police department is stretched. But yet when I go on Facebook, and yes, I go on Facebook for professional reasons and for personal, I see all the different Facebook pages and people complain our trash isn't being picked up in time. What about all the twigs and branches that fell? A recycling bin, I lost my recycling bin. These are things that people complain about, but yet we have 20 and 30-year-old fire trucks that are breaking down. We don't have enough volunteers. Why not? Didn't volunteer. I volunteer in the CERT program. I'm a little too old to probably jump in the back of a fire truck like I used to when I was 20. But these guys here, both volunteer and career, do a great job, men and women. I don't see anybody, and I don't mean this about the Board of Ed, but no one's scrutinizing the Board of Ed. Yes, there's a lot of mandates that have to be done. And there was one part of it I just read about the out-of-town transportation. But we're not I don't want to say attacked, but we're not scrutinizing that part. I don't want my taxes to go up. No one does. But our firemen want to get raises because everything goes up for them. Our police, our public works. This was a tight budget. A lot of the problems come up from Hartford and from Washington, D.C. We can control what we have here. We have a lot of new businesses coming in, but we have to prepare for it. A lot of new economic development. If we don't grow as a town, reinvest, we're going to have another 9/11 moment like we did in August of 2017. And I say that as a whole with all our emergency services. They're important. I've used the emergency services. Unfortunately, in 1 month, I had to call 3 times. The paramedics were there within 7 minutes to take care of my wife. That's incredible, considering at 2 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, snowy night, cold. That's what we pay for. We talked about the chief asking for 16 firemen. That's a little not correct that he did ask for that, but it was part of the SAFER grant. Now, the SAFER grant is, unfortunately, we have to beg for money to go down to Washington. Our chief's got to go down to Washington, D.C., and pretty much beg to get money for our fire department. Can't ask for 2, can't ask for 4, had to ask for 16, and it's not guaranteed. There's thousands of other fire departments and police departments that put in for this. So that's why we had to buy the fire truck now. It's not guaranteed. They still haven't announced the FEMA grants. Well, they just started doing the smaller ones. We won't know until maybe October if we even get anything out of that. We got to take care of it now. This budget is not perfect, but it's keeping things in check. We could take out all $4.8 million out, save us some money, but God forbid something happens. I don't want to be I don't want to be the one to tell the person, sorry, we didn't have the money to put the truck out there. We talk about car break-ins. We've got to have more police patrols. That means you need more policemen, more cars. You want your trash picked up at a certain time. We have to fix our trucks. Again, it's not a perfect budget. They never are. But it's a good budget. I hope. I'm going to support the budget as presented. Unless somebody else can come up with a better idea, I don't see us going any other way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. Would anyone like to speak for the first time? Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Gabrielle.
Hi, I'm Amanda Gabriel from 18 Renee Lane, and I am feeling woefully underdressed tonight. You guys look great. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm gonna be really quick because you've been standing for a long time, and I do appreciate all that you do for us currently, and I feel like maybe I should just be quick about this and say, I like living, living is my favorite, and I fully support this budget because I would like to continue living. End of speech.
Would anyone like to speak for the first time? Please come forward now, or I'm going to start allowing those who have previously spoken to come back up. Going once, going twice. All right, Ms. Boehme, would you like to come back up for another 10 minutes? And we'll keep going around.
Once again, Sally Boehme, 5 Blossom Drive. I just want to restate that I have always supported all apparatus purchases, and I also supported the $24,000 for the vests. And for those watching on TV, all the firemen are leaving. They don't even want to hear the rest of my comments. I find that interesting. The ultimate goal, if we hire 2 firefighters per year, is to get to a 10-person shift for each of the 4 shifts. Currently, we have 8 per shift. At the February 26th Fire Commission meeting, I asked the chief a hypothetical. If 10 are on duty and a house fire call comes in, who will go to the fire? He said all 10. And with the August 2017 event in mind, I then asked if a medical call came in during the fire, would any of the 10 men leave the fire and go to the call? Knowing that it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to leave an active fire, I was not surprised when the chief said no one else would answer the medical call. And this is my problem. I believe we need to activate our second rescue ambulance if we go to a 10-person shift to effectively address medical calls. Instead, the chief plans to activate a second engine at Montoise and use it as a second paramedic response vehicle. But I don't think $750,000 engines should go on medical calls. They should go to fires. I think $160,000 rescue ambulances should go on medical calls. And for that, Mr. Marino, the fire union president, called me a terrorist at the February Board of Selectmen meeting, saying I only wanted new firefighters on my terms. Keep in mind, folks, we average about 20 to 35 structure fires per year, but we average 3,000 medical calls a year. At the January 19th Fire Department workshop, a Board of Finance member asked the chief to address the rising engine repair bills. The chief said our engine goes on 10 calls a day. In other towns, the engines go out once or twice. So I rest my case, ladies and gentlemen. We need a second ambulance activated that will stay at headquarters, even during a fire, to be able to go for a potential medical call if we go to 10 per shift. Let me tell you who else thinks we need to activate a second ambulance. Mr. Hallahan and Mr. Monaco. That was their study group recommendation, but no one called them terrorists. Mr. Hallahan, as recently as the March meeting, again stated he still believes that's the best idea. And Mr. Monaco also has said on many occasions he doesn't even see a real crisis in the fire department because all calls are answered on an average of 6 minutes each. And then there's Mr. Doheny on the Board of Finance. At the March 20th meeting, he said, when talking about adding more firefighters, quote, I am not sold on adding 6. I have reservations about adding these 2. Was he called a terrorist? No. And then there is Mr. Leonos, a Board of Finance member and my new best friend. At the March 20th meeting, he said the following during a discussion of adding firefighters. My concern, quote, my concern is by adding additional personnel, I don't see a decrease in overtime. If anything, I see it growing, and I would hope that the chief would always have reserves in the firehouse when there is a fire taking place, so we can dispense other firemen to other emergencies. My assumption is that I am being told otherwise. I am being told all of the firemen would go to one fire. So we are back at ground zero here. We are not accomplishing anything. We are just increasing the staff, unquote. In a nutshell, Mr. Lianos said what I've been saying all along. Was he called a terrorist? No. Mr. Hallahan, Mr. Monaco, and Mr. Lianos agree with me on many of these issues, but I am the target of insults and abuse. I never play the gender card, ladies and gentlemen, but in this scenario, I have no choice. I believe that there is a gender bias prevalent in this town government, and a woman saying how fire department personnel should be allocated just won't be tolerated. It reminds me of the turf war, synthetic turf issue 2 years ago, when I was also insulted and abused and my house was vandalized. It's really sad. And I urge you to watch the February meeting, because I was subjected to continuous abuse and disrespect for 30 minutes by Mr. Marino, the president of the union, and this administration did nothing to stop it. I have been accused of spreading misinformation. Well, I'm sorry, gentlemen, they all left, but I'm sorry, gentlemen, but voicing my opinions, even ones you don't like, is not spreading misinformation. And I will continue to voice my opinions and do what I think is best to control spending and keep taxes low and fulfill the obligations of my oath of office. But let's talk about misinformation. At the November 27th, 2018 Fire Commission meeting, Mr. Marino said in support of more firefighters, quote, North Haven is not the farm town it was 40 years ago with 5,000 people. That, ladies and gentlemen, is real misinformation. In 1970, we had 22,400 people in town. Now, 49 years later, we have 23,888. And back in the 70s, we had manufacturing with 8,000 workers at Pratt & Whitney, and there was Circuit-Wise, Marlins, and Upjohns. Another example of misinformation came from Commissioner Criscola at the February Fire Commission meeting. Mr. Criscola was criticizing the Monday through Friday daytime shift. He said that shift would end on Friday at about 4 o'clock, and he said if your loved one had a heart attack on Friday night, no one would be there till Monday morning. That is a total and disgraceful misrepresentation. There would still be normal 8-man shift on duty 24/7, just like now. And worse, the chairman and the chief, who both knew better, sat silently saying nothing to correct Mr. Criscola's misrepresentations. And I would like to close, if I may, with a very personal story. And I assure you, it is relevant to this budget. I had a meeting with Mr. Marino about a year ago at Rosadini headquarters. I knew the late Chief John Rosadini personally. He was a great man. And I spoke with Mr. Marino, and he said something interesting to me. He said that people don't realize that our paramedics, they are on the front line. They work, they go into people's homes, they go into people's bedrooms, and they work at the bedside of our citizens. And that struck a chord with me, ladies and gentlemen, because, and I would like to tell a personal story. My mother died in January of 2010, and the last 50 years of her life, she struggled terribly from the symptoms of multiple sclerosis. For most of those 50 years, she was bedridden and could not walk, and my father and I cared for her in our home. One morning, I'll never forget it, October 30th, 2009, I couldn't get my mother out of bed, and I called 911. We lived on St. John, so 2 people from the fire department were there within minutes, and a few minutes later, 2 people from AMR were there. And we were in my mother's bedroom. She was still in bed under the covers, and after a few questions were asked and vital signs taken, it was time for her to be lifted out of bed onto the stretcher. My mother only had on her nightshirt and a diaper, and she motioned to me. So I went to her and she whispered in my ear, Sally, all the people in this room, they're all men. I'm embarrassed. And so I would like to say that if we hire more firemen, if this town decides we need more firefighter paramedics, whether it's 2 or 10 or 16 or 100, I don't care. But I hope that we would finally hire some female paramedics to serve at the bedside of our citizens. Thank you for your time and attention.
Mrs. Barrett?
Just to continue, regarding the capital, as Mr. Frieda mentioned, it was increased by almost $1 million, and but since the Board of Finance actually voted on the 3 resolutions, there were a few changes to the capital, namely a cut in the administrative vehicle, ballistic vests, and I guess, Ed, you found a generator coupon and saved $12,500 on the fire department generator. So my question is, who actually made the changes to the capital budget, the reduction to the fire department of $76,500 and added it to IT?
Board of Finance.
So after you voted on it, you made the change?
We made that change before we voted on it.
It was during the meeting?
No, we made the change, and it was given out to the Democratic members at that meeting, and the change was made in that budget.
I see. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so to me, just based on all that I've highlighted, it's clear that Mr. Frieda has mistakenly cited several wrong numbers regarding the proposed budget. And again, we all make mistakes. It's myself included. And it's important to acknowledge them, correct them, and learn from them. It is also critical that our Director of Finance and our members of our Board of Finance are more accountable and vocal in making corrections to statements that they recognize are either misleading or inaccurate. The public expects this of you and relies on your integrity. And due to the lack of transparency in accounting for the total debt obligation, the claim that it's 9.1, but the line item is 7.7, and the debt service fund as a source of revenue, this budget, as it's presented, does not reflect the whole financial picture. As I mentioned, approximately $1.4 million is being kept out of the budget on both the expenditure side and the revenue side. Isn't that correct, Mr. Swienkowski?
No, as the expenditures are coming out of the debt service fund. The revenue is in the debt service fund, the expenditures are in the debt service fund.
Right, and so therefore it is not included on either the revenue side or the expenditure. That debt service fund, $1.4 million, is not included. And if the gross debt of $9.1 million were in fact included in this expenditure budget, isn't it true that the increase in spending in this budget wouldn't be $4.9 million, it would be $6.3 million?
This has been handled the same way in the past. We spent over $2 million on the middle school
We've never
last
had the
year.
debt service budget.
No, we had the middle school, and we pay $2 million in debt out of there last year, and we didn't put that through this fund either, because that's how you handle it.
I understand. And the $5 million in the debt in the middle school account was actually for what? It was for the interest on short-term notes. It is not the same as the debt service fund. So moving forward, my impression of this budget is that the $4.9 million increase, tied for the all-time highest increase in our town's history, sets the financial bar too high for the future. We need to be able to respond to financial curveballs thrown from Hartford, and given all of the risks, I believe that we should make some very important cuts to expenditures. While I applaud Mr. Frieda's economic development success in growing the grand list, a $3 million increase on the town side, which constitutes 6.6%, is way too much. I want to know what happened to the 2.6% increase to the town budget that was targeted at the January Board of Selectmen's workshop. This needs to be reduced. Likewise, the personnel increases that you can see listed on pages 40 to 45 in the budget packet constitute $1.1 million. Only 29.5% are contractual obligations. And so I encourage you to take a look at all of the list of town salaries. And lastly, the Board of Ed is currently very well funded. I worked very hard in recent years to ensure this. And historically, the BOE budget is traditionally created with the expectation of being cut. And I believe that $158,000 could be cut, thereby reducing it from a 2.9% increase to a 2.6 targeted % increase without any negative impact on educational services. And lastly, I would just like to call to everyone's attention that the sum of the 6-figure salaries listed for the 18 BOE administrators adds up to a total of $2.5 million. That to me is shocking. And if anyone is questioning, this could be used as a rallying cry for educational regionalization. Regarding the fire department, I have to agree with many of the points that have already been made by Ms. Boemi. And I believe that the taxpayers expect to see a return on their investment in the form of improved, cost-effective medical response. I believe that the increasing medical calls, which constitute 70% of all calls, indicate that we need paramedics working Monday through Friday day shifts and driving fly cars. Fly cars are inexpensive, $40,000 non-transporting EMS vehicles. We do not need a crew of firefighter EMTs putting 12,000 miles per year on expensive, inefficient, water-filled pumper engines or ladder trucks lumbering across town to respond to medical calls. We don't need water for those. Even Fire Commissioner Zuccarelli said that it's crazy to send ladder trucks to medical calls, but it only happens when 2 other medical calls are going on simultaneously. This speaks to the inappropriate makeup of the fleet. Rather than this endless cycle of abusing, repairing, and replacing fire trucks, let's just use them appropriately. Fire trucks go to fires, medical rescue vehicles go to medical calls. If no second ambulance is allocated, vote no on this budget. To be clear, I do not dislike anyone in the North Haven Fire Department. My husband and I are in awe of the first responders' abilities to override their self-preservation instincts and instead run toward danger and to save others. It is both admirable and heroic. And because I have been honest and respectful in all of my communications with and about the fire department, I do not deserve to be called a terrorist. I consider health, public safety, and education to be top priorities, but I also advocate daily for data-driven decision-making and fiscal responsibility. I do my homework, I attend countless board meetings, I ask probing questions, state my opinions, and offer common sense, financially responsible suggestions for improvements. As a resident and taxpayer, I have the right to speak and be heard. If you disagree with me, prove me wrong, using facts, not insults. In conclusion, with respect to the proposed annual budget for 2019-20, I believe that the North Haven residents deserve 3 things: full disclosure, a modest budget growth, and a mill rate decrease after years of increased spending, bonding debt, and taxes. Many of the lifers in North Haven living on fixed incomes or who are just getting by living check to check desperately need a win, both in the short term and in the long term. In closing, I do not support this 2019-20 annual budget as it is currently presented. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Otherwise, we are okay. I have 2 gentlemen approaching. Mr. Criscola, this gentleman actually hasn't spoken yet, so let's let him go first. And then we'll finish up with Mr. Criscola. Thank you. I'm sorry. Did you speak before?
No.
I didn't think so. Okay, thank you, sir.
Jeff O'Bear, 1124 Hartford Turnpike. I'm a career firefighter in town. I've been a firefighter since I was 16 years old. 10 years as a volunteer, 28 years as a career firefighter, the last 17 as the shift commander. I just wanted to comment on 2 issues. As far as the weighted day shift, the comments have been made that the union was unwilling to negotiate. A weighted day shift was never brought to the union. We never spoke with the special committee. We never spoke with the administration. We never spoke with the chiefs. It was a subject that was never brought up to us. So we never were unwilling to negotiate. It was never an option. We don't feel it would work. We agree with the chief's position of putting another engine company on. As far as manpower goes, we could put 12 men on a shift, and they're all going to go to a fire. Our core mission is fighting fires. It's very labor intensive. Fire grows, it doubles in size every minute. Getting people on scene as fast as possible is the important part. If we had 14 guys on a shift, they would all be going. It's that labor intensive. In order to have paramedics stand by at the station, we would have to have 15 guys on a shift just to go to the fires and then have paramedics standing by so they could do the medical calls. It's very costly, very labor intensive, and we're never going to be in that place where we can leave guys behind when a fire comes in. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Criscuolo?
Again, I just want to answer a couple of questions, and this is not personal, trust me. You said you wanted to leave men behind, and our lieutenant just answered your question. I was going to come here and answer. You can't leave men behind. We don't have enough. We don't know how many you're going to need. First of all, you heard a battalion chief and our chief tell you that we need at least 15, there should be, at a structure fire. We only have 8 if the entire department goes, so we're already short 7. Now you want to leave somebody behind. It's not going to work. What if somebody gets trapped in the house, the homeowner or one of our own firefighters? So you can't leave people behind. Everybody has to go out there. If the fire gets put under control and we do have the ability to break away 2 men and send them to a medical emergency, this is why we need a water supplied truck, not just an ambulance. I know it's cheaper to spend $40,000 than $700,000. But if someone has to come to your home, you want to make sure they have the water. We're not going to borrow the hose next door. Can't use the garden hose, okay? And again, you talked about there's no female on the paid staff. We have a lot of female on the volunteer staff. In the almost 25 years I'm a fire commissioner, we had 1 female applicant who did not pass. So it's not that we say females can't apply. They choose not to apply. I don't know why. If you have some that want to apply and that are paramedics, we would love to have them come down, really. So I don't know where we're going. You talk about that it seems like the women are being picked on. I'm on your own Democratic Town Committee. I believe that our entire administrative board there is all female. Should I be offended? I was the former town chair. So I'm not offended. That's who chooses to sit there, and that's who is there. And that's the same thing with our department. And I want to say one thing. I know Brian Marino since he came on the department. And I think you took that a little out of context, that he called you a terrorist. That's not his style. It's not his makeup. He's an educated young man. So sometimes things get said in the heat, but I don't think he meant that you were a terrorist. I think you just kind of blew that up. And you said I passed the comment that Monday to Friday, if someone should get a heart attack after 4:30 on a Friday night, again, you took that out of context. Yes, you want to have paramedics from 8 to 4. You can't specifically say when someone is going to need a paramedic. We don't know. And I know you're citing that we have Valley Street and the other medical hospitals that we attend to. You're right. But you never know what could happen at night. So if we're going to put firefighters on, we're not going to put them on specific shifts. There's no continuity. They won't be able to work with their fellow workers. It has to be an even flow so everyone knows where they are. And they get acquainted with everybody on the shift. So I know you meant well and you probably mean well. And again, I go back to the beginning. It's nice to read a book. It's nice to be a Monday morning quarterback. You don't have the time or expertise to be a chief. And that's why he wears the bugles. He knows when to summons the troop. So I'm sorry, but that's how it should go. I don't see any other department being scrutinized or run by the people in the audience. No one is trying to be the selectman. No one is trying to be director of public works. No one is trying to be the police chief. No one is trying to be the town attorney. No one is trying to be the finance director. They want to be the chief. I don't know why. This is why we have him. Please, let him do his job. This is what we need for the safety of the town and the safety of the firefighters themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Criscuolo. Would anyone else like to speak tonight before we close out the public hearing? This is your last opportunity to speak. Going once, going twice. Then I will end this public hearing, and I do remind you and invite you to come to the budget town meeting, which will occur on May, I'm sorry. Dun, dun, dun. Gosh. In May. May 13th, I'm sorry. And the referendum, which will occur on May 21st. Thank you very much and have a great evening.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.